This is my disassembly video for this Yanmar tractor engine, this two-cylinder diesel engine. And you're going to want to check out Matt's shop. I'll leave the link in the description. That's a much better, uh, basically full overhaul of this entire tractor. And he does the rebuild. He's got all the good specifications and everything. I'm just doing this kind of as a supplementary video, just in case he maybe missed anything, or if there's any different angles that I've got, or explaining things in maybe a different way. So we're going to start off this video just by doing a little bit of a walk around of this engine. And I glaze over this pretty quickly. I'm into probably 8 hours of editing already in this. But you're going to be, maybe you might be a little bit more interested in the next video I got coming. The heads were in the worst shape. I should have honestly gotten new heads, or maybe at least definitely should have gotten new valves and gotten the seats recut. But just really wasn't in the budget. Don't really have the time, and I wasn't able to find just valves independently. I think I would have had to have gotten the whole head. For some reason, I wasn't able to find valves. At least at that moment when I was looking. So in the following video to this, there's going to be me just spending hours lapping with lapping compound and getting those valves back into condition, and it runs pretty good. It's not too bad. The only problem I'm really having is injectors now. The fuel had been sitting for years and years and years, and the tank I honestly had to get rid of because it was in such bad condition. There was this black sludge in there that was just impossible to remove with really anything that I was able to throw at it. So I was just actually maybe I'll do an end video showing some of the customizations I made to this. I just used a fuel tank, just a jerry can for a new fuel tank. Okay, so we're just doing a little bit of disassembly here. Here is the governor, and this all goes back together pretty simple, except for this area here. Um, the front portion of this governor assembly, and you're going to see this in better detail in the reassembly video. I ended up having to pull this cover off. I'm pretty sure it was 4 times, and it is a nightmare. It takes forever to do, and I end up bending some of the governor mechanism a little bit. So that's there's a little bit of a trick to it, but we'll get to that when we get there. Um, don't worry too much about it. This is all got to come apart. Right now, I've got a stamp kit. If you don't got a stamp kit, right here, I'm actually even just using chisels. Center punches, and just making a number of dots to identify matching components. It wasn't really necessary. I'm pretty sure these injectors are interchangeable anyways, but I just like to do my due diligence and go a step above, just so I know for sure. Maybe if I'm doing some troubleshooting later on, if I would have had problems with injectors, I would have been able to identify what position they were in, or if I'm having cylinder problems, at least now I know. Um, it's just more evidence I could have. So these are just coolant passages here. That back cover is just a cover for a coolant passage. I'm not sure why I took a photo of that bolt there. Now I'm pulling off the water pump, and I assume that little hole there, that's your pyrometer, I think, and I'm assuming that little hole is for a bypass or something. Not really sure on the particulars of that. So the valve cover head comes off. You've got some decompression adjustments that you'll need to deal with there on reassembly. So right now I'm breaking these off, and I'm breaking them off slowly, a little bit at a time. I don't know if that's necessary, but it's something I like to do. Pulling the head off. And don't get too crazy on disassembly here. So now we'll have a little bit of a look at now you can see now how gnarly this head was. And the one looks worse than the other. They were both horribly pitted. We'll get to that in the head video, but yeah, honestly, definitely should have put new valves in. Definitely should have recut the seats. Everything was just completely seized. Um, I think I put lapping compound on the valve itself to hone the guides essentially. Yeah, it was just in really, really bad shape. So here's my stamp kit. Now I'm able to stamp the side of the case here. Don't get crazy pulling stuff apart. You want to keep those. What are those? I think off the top of my head, valve push rods. Keep those in the orientation and the order that you pulled them out of there, and put them back the exact same way. And then you won't have to worry as much. I guess it's not really too crazy crucial, but they like to seat themselves a special way. So put them back in the cup that they came from, because uh, then they're going to end up having to reseat themselves, right? They form a nice little indent, their own little indent, I guess you could say, in their little cups that they're sitting in. Just want to put them back where they came from. Pulling this cover off, pretty easy. Putting it back on, it's not that bad, it's just bad. I said, we'll get there. Pull this mechanism apart. It's all pretty simple. It's just little. You got to bend it a certain way. It's a little bit tricky. You got to like spin it around to get that hook off there, because it's super overbent. And that's kind of how the governor, the weights spin and pushes it out, and that adjusts your throttle for timing. Yeah, so that shaft is for the crank, and that shaft is for the cam. I did not remove the cam. I did not have to remove the cam, so I did not remove the cam. There's your oil pickup, bit of a screen on it, I guess we'll call it. It goes into an oil gallery that goes up to that oil pump right there. I ended up pulling the oil pump off. It came with a gasket. There wasn't a gasket on it when I pulled it off, so I just put it back on without a gasket. I don't know. Then that thing that I was pointing out there with the prongs, that is your drive mechanism for your hydraulic pump. So now I'm using these punches again to make sure that my caps are matched. You want to put the caps back again in the same orientation and order that you pull them out in. And checking the bearings. Really, the bearings are fine. Looked fine to me. Wasn't really any scoring. Nothing was broken. But it was a full rebuild kit that I got with this. You don't want to be taking a rusty square bar and jamming it in around your crankshaft when you're pounding your pistons out, but you got to do what you got to do. The least I could have done was use a nice piece of round bar, but it's not what I had. So I had a bunch of broken piston rings here. That's probably part of the reason that they parked this vehicle. The other reason, I believe, was the completely disintegrated clutch, which you see in the previous video. And pistons come out nice. I'm replacing the pistons. I just put that in there because the rags that you come across are funny sometimes. I used to drink a lot of Red Dog when I was younger. There are your timing marks. You can see them pretty good now. Now, because these are helical gears, it's interesting. I worked on a lot of gearboxes in my career, and not too often helical gears though, because I didn't do a whole lot of motor work. So timing marks, I've always had straight cut teeth when I'm dealing with timing marks, but we actually have helical gears, and it's not really that much more difficult. It's just I was a little bit paranoid putting this back together because I wanted to make sure that it went back exactly the way it was. And when you spin it together, the position of those marks changes drastically. Um, but just double, triple check it, and make sure that if you're taking a picture, or if you're using this picture, or when you're looking at it, when you're putting it back in its orientation, just make sure that you're dead straight on with it, and it's fine. You really don't want to be pulling that cover back off. Get back into that case is not fun. So Not sure why we're watching this again, but just a little bit of glitch with OBS here. And now I am pulling out the helical gear for the crank because I'm getting ready to pull the crank off. So I'm lifting this up and getting ready to pull that back cover off. The crank comes out through the back, and getting ready to take it off the engine stand, pulling that case seal off. That's something else that you'll see that I fought with quite a bit in reassembly, because there's these stupid little thrust washers, I think is what they are, and the seal's a real nightmare. And yeah. Oh, those are, so this is how I thought the flywheel was supposed to come off, by just taking some bolts and punching them through those pushing holes and pushing the case out. But the flywheel doesn't come off that way. It comes off by using a puller mechanism. This just pushes against the case, and that'll pop that case cover right out of there. Comes nice and easy. And it can only go back in one way. You're not gonna, that's what I'm just showing there. You're not gonna screw that up. There's a seal inside there. Like I said, there's also that thrust washer inside there. Make sure you don't, there's the thrust washer. Um, there is your main bearing. Would be the main bearing, right? Yeah. And here is my puller mechanism for the sleeves. This deserves its own video, but again, check out Matt Shop's video. There's tons of actually videos out there on how to build these puller mechanisms. These sleeves come out super easy. It's going to take you a few hours maybe to build this, because you need to have like a little bit of a, you don't need to, but you want to have a little bit of a lip on the edge of that, the part that goes on the sleeve. You can kind of see here. It's rounded to shape the roundness of the cylinder, and it's got just a little bit of a lip on there to keep it from moving side to side. And then you use some threaded rod and some spacers. I probably should have not used angle iron up against the face of the top of the cylinders there, but or at least put some cardboard or something in there against it. And then this was interesting to me. So it didn't have O-rings in there before, so clearly this was rebuilt before, or maybe this is how it comes from the factory. I don't know, but they just used silicone. Assume that silicone in there instead of an O-ring. Seemed to have worked. I don't think that was the reason it failed. I don't think it was blowing any head gasket or anything like that, or. So I don't know what that was all about, but that's what was in there. There is an O-ring you're putting back in though, so that's me using a socket, just pounding that out. If you've got a little bit of, we'll get into that more in reassembly too, but if you've got a little bit of duster, keyboard duster cleaner, dust cleaner, and you want to spray that on bearings when you go to remove them, to shrink them a little bit, something cold to shrink them a little bit, that'll help, but you don't really need it, but if you got it, it'll help. What am I doing here? I'm cleaning up the case with a wire wheel. You should probably be using like a bronze or a copper. I don't know if they make copper wire wheels, but you know what I mean. Some non-ferrous wire wheels. Pounding out seal there. Some of these seals can be a real pain in the butt to get out of there. There's another main bearing that you'll need to press out or pound out. Put it on some blocks, 2x4s, 2x6s. Get a right size socket. Pound it out of there. I use a chisel or screwdriver to pound the seals out of there. I don't know, seal pullers just don't work for me. What am I doing now? I pulled the hydraulic gear pump or gear off, drive gear, and I pulled the oil pump off. I'm just checking it. Spun it, made sure it felt like it had suction. Using Loctite. Now, this is a big thing. This is an important thing. Maybe you don't need necessarily use like permanent Loctite. There are instances where you absolutely should be using permanent Loctite in areas where the bolts are submerged in oil, because those threads just, I mean, even if you clean them, I guess maybe if you clean them perfectly, but so here's the thing. I've done repairs on a lot of gearboxes, and a lot of times previous mechanics don't use Loctite, and it's just a matter of time before things come apart, and then it just uh, cannibalizes that gearbox. You really want to be using Loctite. I know a lot of people have their stigma around using Loctite in things that are submerged in oil, bolts that are submerged in oil. Absolutely, 100% of the time, probably use Loctite. Very important.